Hello viewers, this is Dr. Making Stuff, and I just wanted to make this recording because, well, I have a Legend of Zelda prediction. The Legend of Zelda is one of my favorite video game series, and because of that I feel that, well, I owe it to you guys and myself to make this prediction. So sit back, relax, and listen to the nerdiness unfold. So, there's a new Zelda game coming out in 2015. This Zelda game is supposed to focus on a more open world feel, and supposed to fulfill, well, basically what the original Zelda 1 and 2 were trying to do. You see, Zelda 1 couldn't give the visual hints to the player that it needed to in order to have the free roaming open world action adventure game that it was trying to be. It needed something like Dark Souls, where you can see visual hints from the environment in order to know where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to do. But unfortunately, it couldn't have that due to graphical limitations. Then was Zelda 2, which tried to be an RPG, but failed pretty badly at the progression that an RPG requires. It didn't have a real sense of agency, and leveling up felt boring due to an uncomplex level mechanic and also an uncomplex fighting mechanic. You just slash, 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 use a spell, use a spell. See, turn-based RPGs involve a lot of strategy, and regular RPGs that are hack and slash involve complex combat, but Zelda 2 couldn't have either one of those things due to graphic limitations. This is the reason why a Link to the Past, which is a relatively simple game, comparatively, was so much more popular. One, they gave the player a clear goal to work for, and two, they also had, decent progression of story and feel with an uncomplex combat system, which is how it had to be because that's what the graphics could do at the time. Not only that, there was an extreme advancement in technology that allowed them to give some environmental hints about where the player was supposed to go. That and a more linear story. So, they did a lot of things to create a Zelda formula with Link to the Past, and if you've watched Ego Raptor, you've heard him talk about this. Not only that, they perfected that formula, or standardized it, I guess, for Ocarina of Time. Now, my favorite Zelda game, full disclosure, is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. I like its feel, I like its story, I like its go anywhere attitude, but it still follows most of these, ways of doing things from The Legend of Zelda 1, from The Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, and from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So, there hasn't been this open world RPG feel to Zelda in a really long time. There hasn't been a Dark Souls of Zelda. 1 and 2 were kind of like that, but they didn't get to be what they really wanted to be. Because of this, Miyamoto is going back and he is doing it all over again. He is going to make an open world Zelda game. Okay? A spiritual successor to Zelda 1 and 2 that's going to be what he wanted those games originally to be. And I can't wait for The Legend of Zelda 2015. But I have a few predictions, a few story predictions, character predictions, and its setting in the all-important timeline. So, we're going to talk about all of that. So, I mentioned the timeline. Let's talk about the Legend of Zelda timeline for a moment. Okay, full disclosure, Miyamoto and the creators of Zelda really don't give a crap about Zelda's story. That's the reason why the timeline is so complicated, there's so much time travel, there's so much bullshit. The reason for this is because Miyamoto makes the games before he makes the story, or at least the video game's main core mechanics before he writes the story of the game. He writes the story of the game around the mechanics of the game. Now, see, I prefer story-driven games, and that's the reason I like Twilight Princess so much, is because it feels like the story was really well thought out. But that's not the way Zelda games are made, like, at all. Like, at all. So, the thing is, the timeline really doesn't matter as much as people think it does. It does place certain Zelda games in certain areas, and it does try to make sense out of the Zelda universe, so it's important. It's just not the most important thing. However, I feel that the timeline is specifically important for this Zelda game because I think that this Zelda game is going to be really different, and part of that is because of where it's placed in the timeline. In the Hero is Defeated timeline, which is where the original Zelda 1 and 2 take place, there has not been a sequel to The Legend of Zelda 2 in this entire time. There is no game in the Legend of Zelda timeline that takes place after The Legend of Zelda 2. Doesn't exist, okay? There's no sequel to The Legend of Zelda 2. it's the end of its timeline. Legend of Zelda 1 had one hero. The Legend of Zelda 2 had the same hero. Both games have two different Princess Zeldas. That's complicated. You gotta go read the Hyrule story if you want to know about that. Or maybe I'll make another video about the two different Princess Zeldas in those games. But the reality is that there has been no sequel to the original Zelda games. You might be saying, but Link to the Past was Zelda 3. No, Link to the Past was not Zelda 3. Link to the Past took place far before Zelda 1 and 2. Like, a long time before. I'll show a picture of the Zelda timeline up here, and maybe that'll help make things a little bit clearer. But yeah. So, the question becomes, where does this take place in the timeline? Well, Miyamoto says that this game is going to be a spiritual successor to Zelda 1 and 2. And I don't think it's just going to succeed spiritually. I think it's actually numerically going to be the third Zelda game. That's right. I think that this game is going to take place after Zelda 1 and Zelda 2. Why do I think that? Well, part of it has to do with the way that the hero looks in the opening trailer. Now, a lot of people had a lot of issues with Link's appearance in the trailer. I didn't really, I just thought it was interesting. For instance, he wears what I consider to be the royal disguise. We've seen Zelda disguised a few times in the series by this point. One time in Twilight Princess where she had this big long riding hood that was beige. Another time in Wind Waker where we saw her as Tetra. You might not consider that a disguise, but it kind of is. And then another time in Ocarina of Time where she was Sheik, and, yeah. This version of Link is disguised exactly like a member of the royal family might disguise themselves, and because of that, you could probably guess that he's a member of the royal family. Not only that, he carries the royal bow, usually used by Zelda herself. He has a horse from the beginning of the game, it seems like, and not only that, he's the most well-equipped hero from the beginning of the game that there's ever been, if the trailer is to be believed. And not only that, but this version of Link is the best marksman in any Zelda game ever, confirmed by Miyamoto. What this essentially means is that he has training in the royal art of bowmanship. What that essentially means is that he is in some way related to Zelda. I am contending that this character is a prince. Now, that would indicate, based on his physical appearance, that he is the offspring of Link and Zelda from Zelda 2. At least, ancestrally. He might be the great-grandson or grandson of these people, but I think that he is indeed related to both Link and Zelda from those games. Okay, so he's a member of the royal family. What else do we need to know based on his appearance and the appearance of this trailer? Well, Miyamoto said that part of the original vision for Zelda is that the Triforce was going to be shaped like computer chips. Basically, the Triforce was originally going to be kind of computer chips, and the technology of the gods was going to take more of a center place stage. In Wind Waker, you kind of see this intention with, the Tower of the Gods. The Tower of the Gods has circuits and computer chips on the outside of it, and the boss that you fight, which is a guardian for the gods that's supposed to test the hero, is, well, he's a robot. So, the magic in the Zelda universe mainly comes from the gods, and that seems to be mostly technological. Of course, people don't understand that technology, so they think of it as magic, but it is definitely technology. This vision didn't leave the Zelda universe just because the Triforce didn't end up looking like a computer chip. And we see this giant laser beam shooting ancient spider with moss growing on it right in the beginning. However, the Heroes Defeated timeline focuses the most on the technology of the gods, which is the reason why I think that this takes place in, well, that part of the timeline. Not only that, there doesn't appear to be any Gorons or any Zoras or anything. No other creatures, it doesn't seem, besides Hylians. I mean, there does seem to be other creatures, but no other people. It's something that's usually front and center in a Zelda trailer is that there's other races, and this time there isn't. This is also because in the Heroes Defeated timeline, there really isn't anything but human beings when it comes to people. That and one Sheikah and a few Hylians. So, I'm sorry. Also, in terms of technology, there's this giant laser bow. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that, well, this Zelda game definitely is futuristic in a sense. These two things are front and center when they normally wouldn't be. Usually it's in much later in a Zelda game when you encounter those hopping statues or laser beam shooting robots, and there's never been a piece of the hero's equipment that's super technologically advanced to the point where it's, glowing like a laser beam, like the laser bow does. So this all seems to indicate a place in the timeline that's later on and probably after Zelda 2. So, part one of my theory is that this version of Link is related to the Princess Zelda and the hero from The Legend of Zelda 2, and that places it after The Legend of Zelda 2. But what this really means is that this is The Legend of Zelda 3. That's right, The Legend of Zelda 3. Now, they might not call it that. It's probably going to be called The Legend of Zelda Hero's Legacy, or The Legend of Zelda Destiny of the Wind, or The Legend of Zelda some Legacy Destiny Fate bullshit, which will indicate that basically this hero is more fated in some way to be the hero because of his heritage, which, is pretty extensive considering being the son of the Princess Zelda and the hero. So this version of Link is, definitely going to have more responsibility, but he's also more trained than previous heroes have been, but he's also in a way probably a little bit more pampered than most heroes have been. So this is going to be a very different thing because it's taking place after Zelda 2. That is my prediction. This is Zelda 3. Now the problem is that one, new fans are going to be confused. New fans are going to be confused because they're like, I didn't play Zelda 1 or 2 because there hasn't been a Zelda 1 and 2. So they're going to have to remake those games and re-release them at some point, probably in a bundle pack, in order to make things less confusing for those fans, which will be a good opportunity. If they remake Zelda 1 and 2 the way they recently kind of remixed, A Link Between Worlds, A Link to the Past with A Link Between Worlds, then they can make Zelda 1 and 2 a great thing. I think it should be a top-down Zelda, but yeah. So that's probably going to happen if they're going to call it Zelda 3. But I don't think they're going to call it Zelda 3, although that would produce massive hype and marketing. They so far haven't released a working title for it. It's just The Legend of Zelda 2015. This emphasis on The Legend of Zelda is part of what makes me think, this is going to be the third installment and they're going to call it Zelda 3. If they do that, they'll get fans that haven't played the games in years to play them, but they'll also kind of alienate new fans who have just played Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and think they're experiencing a concise story when it's actually a fucking timeline mess. So, I don't know if they're going to do that, but that's basically my theory. One, he's a prince. Two, he's the child of Princess Zelda and Link from Zelda 2. And three, sorry, this is Zelda 3, which would be fantastic, and that's pretty much the theory. And if I'm right, awesome. You should hit that subscribe button, and I can predict the future more for you. Anyways, that's more or less my musings on the new Zelda release, and I'm sorry that it took so long. Anyway, bye for now. Have a good day. Oh, by the way, P.S. Before I go, I did not make any of the images in this. Those are the property of Nintendo. Some are probably the property of some DeviantArt artist too, but most of the images are not mine. I did not make any of them, except for the Doctor Making Stuff animations, of course. So that just lets you know that, I'm not taking credit where credit isn't due. Um, I don't know the actual artists' names who worked on any of these images, so unfortunately I can't give them credit, but I'm at least not going to steal their stuff. Okay,